respond to God for who He is and what He's done for us. Who else would rocks cry out to worship? His glory taught the stars to shine. Perhaps creation longs to have the words to sing. This joy is mine. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs and 1,000 more. Who else to die for our redemption? Whose resurrection means our rise? Who's in charge enough to sing of all you've done? But I have eternity to try. With 1,000 hallelujahs, we magnify your name. You alone deserve the glory, the honor, and the praise. Lord Jesus, this song is forever yours. 1,000 hallelujahs, 10,000 more.
Wowzers. You guys, I love when the morning starts like this. Good morning, everybody. All right, real quick, it's the meet and greet. This means we have a question for you. We're going to talk about generations today. I'd like you to look at the person next to you and share, if you're so willing, what generation you're in, if you know what generation you're in, or if you're pleading the fifth. Go for it. All right. All right, so in full disclosure, I made you all tell I'm Gen X. Huge surprise. I know a lot of you thought I might have been a boomer. What about you, Sharisa?
I'm not selling.
You guys can sit. You can sit.
No, I'm Gen X.
You're Gen X, yeah, for sure. You know it. Yeah. All right, so I'm Erin, and I'm on the team here at Birmingham, and this is my good friend Sharisa. And Sharisa, yes, there it is.
Yay!
Oh.
Good morning, Kensington family.
So we invited Sharisa up here today to just speak a little bit into her serving here. So, how long have you been serving here, and on what teams do you serve?
Well, I've been serving probably a few months after I started attending here, so that's probably 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years. I served on the coffee team originally, and during the pandemic, and when we started coming back in, I joined the usher team. So I do both ushering and serving coffee, which is what I was doing this morning if you guys saw me in the
Thank you
lobby.
for that. We all need the yes, thank you.
You're very
thank
welcome.
you. Talk to us a little bit about why you made that decision to serve.
I think I wanted to feel what I felt when I got here. The welcoming nature, the love, the community, and I wanted to give that back. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than just myself and just sitting in the seats. I also wanted the opportunity for people who look like me to know that it's comfortable being here, it's comfortable serving, it's comfortable giving back. So that's why I decided to serve.
I said this during Run Through from the Heart, but I'm going to say it again in front of all of you. If you've seen Sharisa out in the hallway, she's accomplished all of these things as just a complete, bright, shining light. So thank you very much.
Bless
Thank
you.
you. Okay, so what do you say to people that are like, I kind of want to do it, but I'm not sure?
Just do it. I think everybody that's been in this position, that's been on the stage helping to co-host has said it, just do it. And it may sound like a cliche, but you never know until you try. The heart of Jesus is in every single one of us, and you just have to sometimes pull it out. And I feel like if I can be that voice, or if I can be that face, or if I can be that smile, whatever it is, to bring somebody in, to make them feel comfortable, it's worth it. And not only that, I was able to get community here. I was able to be a part of community here, and it allowed me to be on this stage and get up here and talk to you guys. So I think all you got to do is just try it. You'll love it.
So if you are interested, come see us at the Hub afterwards. We just have a little card for you to fill out. Or if you just want to talk about it more, we'd love to have you. Okay, couple quick announcements, but very fun. We're going to Comerica this week, and we want you to join us. Yes! All right, so we went last year. It was amazing. We're going back. We have limited tickets. There are 75 available, so there's going to be a big group of us there. Did you go last year?
I did not go last
You
year.
did not go
no,
last year.
No, I did not go last year, but I'm going this
you,
year.
You already signed up this year.
Yes,
Okay,
I am.
perfect. So tickets are $22. They're actually really great seats. They're not $22 seats, so it's really a steal. If it's on your bucket list for this summer, go ahead and register, or we're going to make it really easy. I will have my computer out at the Hub afterwards. If you want to just go out, register at the Hub, I will hand your tickets to you, and I will see you Thursday night. I mean, we're just going to make it that easy. So can we hear it for ease?
Woo! Yeah.
Yeah, all right, I like that. Okay, and then the last thing I have, which you definitely did last time, was the Women's Night is coming up. So we have our version of Getaway, which is a local women's event. We did it in May, I believe, and we had 60 women at my house, and it was the best.
It was fabulous.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was a blessing.
I met a ton of new people, and I had so many laughs, and I was filled up for a really long time, and the police came.
I missed that. I was not there for the
Could you
police.
please leave it to me to have the police come during a church outing? Like, what is going on, Aaron? Okay, so register, please, kensingtonchurch.org/BHAM women. All right, so those are all the announcements for today.
Sounds
I really do hope that you step into that. Now we're getting started. I said at the beginning of the service that we'd be talking about generations today. So every generation has their own strength, wisdom, uniqueness that helps shape the way that they actually see the world. Today, we're starting a new series that's going to talk about the importance of investing in each of those generations and why intergenerational relationships are so important and also powerful. So we had a group of 4 generations sit down and have a very honest conversation with one another. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at that discussion and really lean into how God would have us shape that conversation and what to do with it and how to best lead and empower our next generation.
I'm Generation X. Gen X, I think, is what they call us. I think we're very strong. I think we have a really good work ethic. We value family, value relationships, like that personal connection. Some of our weaknesses, we're very set in our ways. We like things done in an orderly fashion, and I think we sometimes don't like change, or it's difficult to embrace change when we are used to things going a certain way.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I'm a baby boomer. I think our generation is a lot like your generation. And, although I think we're very strong from a patriotic standpoint, I think that would be a big thing with us. We're very hardworking, and we were, I think, the last generation that really wanted to stay at one place for a long time, from an employment standpoint. And of course, that's really changed. But
so I'm a millennial. Strengths, I think we are a very flexible generation. We fly by the seat of our pants. We want an adventure out of life. We've grown up in a way where we expect more out of life, which lends itself to, things like justice, things like taking new ground. And on the flip side of that, it has left, which the boomers love to tell me, has left our generation in a very entitled position. So we expect a lot out of life, but are struggling maybe to catch up on how to actually get it.
Do you agree with the boomer generation saying that there's a sense of entitlement with your generation?
Totally. Yeah,
okay.
Definitely there is. And I think that's really probably one of the biggest pain points in between each of the generations is they feel certain things, they have a way that they expect life to be, but the why behind it is different for each generation, and that
Definitely
is what each generation craves to be understood in. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, and I think it's also key because part of the problem or the disconnect is the understanding of each of the generations and the why that you just mentioned. And I think that only comes with relationships, because then you have the opportunity to have those conversations and understand why I believe like I do, or why you believe like you do, or why you handle things a certain way versus how Elizabeth would handle certain things. So, yeah.
Do you think your generations live in more of a black and white, yes or no perspective? Because I feel like our generations tend to view things through like more of a gray scale when it comes to any type of idea and belief, and even when it comes to the Bible and what Jesus says and what following Jesus looks like. Whereas maybe for you guys, does that feel like your generation believes like in more of a yes or no, this is how it is, this is how it isn't mentality?
we do come from a yes/no, black or white perspective, but we're learning to be more open to things and really appreciate the strides that have been made with the diversity and inclusion and other things. However, we wrestle with the biblical standard for things, and we're called to love everyone. I don't know that that means we just throw out the book and say, we're going to rip these pages out because they don't fit with my new belief system.
Yeah.
But how do we model Christ in these challenging environments?
Yeah. You said we're learning. And to fall on our sword, the millennials, Gen Zers have not been gracious in that. When a boomer, a Gen X, or anyone for that matter has held maybe a short-sighted view in our eyes, they've been attacked instead of embraced. And there's this division where we could be equally as criminal of being dogmatic and black and white in the middle of our more thoughtful areas, as maybe many of us would like to think about it.
I was taught the yes and no, black and white, but I even still questioned it, and going back to what is the Holy Spirit telling me that I need to do in that situation with what the Word says, and then trying to move in love. And you'd fall short. No one's perfect, but I think that's where we have to start, and that's the important part. So
we all are craving this sense of more injustice, but the platforms many of us engage with it on are so fraudulent.
yeah.
And we are all becoming very used to that and exchanging it for the real version of relationship and the real version of love and the real version of experiencing the tension when we have this conversation right now.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying, we want that.
Yeah.
We want folks to understand us and why we think the way we do and why we do the things we do. And I don't think that we think we're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, right. Yeah. We want to be understood as well.
Yeah.
We also want to feel valued in our old-timey ways and our set ways. And we still want to feel like we're relevant.
Hearing you guys talk, I was really humbled, embarrassed, and convicted that we've really thrown away your generation as, and it was very vulnerable of you to share that we want to be wanted and feel relevant and important in your lives. I haven't heard that very often from your generation, and it made me realize, wow, that's very honest of you, and also made me feel really sad. I'm like, man, isn't that just like us? We burn things hot and fast and throw it away and on to the next one, and we take you guys for all we can get, and then we demonize you for things we don't like, and that's sad. So I wanted to say, public apology from the millennials and Gen Zers. We love you guys. We need you guys.
I kind of find myself wishing that conversation would just continue this morning, don't you? That was so timely. Oh, I need a music stand because I'm an older boomer and I'm brain dead. Does anybody have a music stand in the back? It would be great. I just found myself really responding emotionally to that interview. Did anybody else feel that way as the four people were beginning to share and talk? Did you feel that or not? Am I making that up? There was this sense in which, with my own kids, probably 15 years ago, I realized I'd always assumed that we would share the same thoughts, and all of a sudden I found myself sharing opinions and life insights, and I realized they were just becoming very still. And some of them became very quiet, and then some of them became very angry and moved through windows of being bombastic about what we believed and didn't believe. And there was just this incredible tension that I don't remember quite having, but I do remember reflecting. I never felt this way about my parents, but in the 60s and 70s, there was this real sense that our parents were really out of touch with our lives. Anybody old enough to remember our parents were square, and there was the sex, drugs, and rock and roll generation, and there was this sense of, I remember every man in my father's generation when they were 50 seemed like they were 90. Does anybody remember that? You never saw a man over 50 that didn't have, his lace-up leather shoes and his suit that he wore every day. Some of us never saw our parents if you ever saw them in casual clothes, you'd be shocked. And then in my generation, my brother's a general surgeon in Memphis, Tennessee, and for the last 40 years, I've never seen him in anything but blue scrubs. I don't even think he owns a suit. And so you just think of how the generations change. And so let me just do this. The Gen A's, they call them Gen A's now, are people being born between 2012 and 2025. That's all 6 of my grandkids and probably more to come. It's kind of that's interesting. And then the Gen Z is born between 1997 and 2012. Anybody Gen Z in here? I know, I recognize. Mike Covey, you were born in 2004? That's what I thought. You and I have about the maturity level of someone born at that period. I'm putting myself with you on that. And then the millennials, which would be 1981 and 1996. Okay, fair number of you. That's all 4 of my kids, who I think are pretty amazing and probably the people I'm learning most from at this moment in my life. It's very interesting. Gen X is 1965 to 1980. How about you? You out there? Okay. In leading Kensington for the last 30 years, I would say it's Gen X people that I've irritated the most on our staff, probably driven them crazy. Whoa, come back here. And then the boomers, which the only thing I want to say about us is there are a lot of us. That's maybe our highest distinctive. And then, does anybody know the name of the generation born 1928 to 1945? No? It's a silent generation. The generation before that, born from 1901 to 1927, is what Tom Brokaw, the famous news anchor at NBC, announced as the greatest generation. They were known as the GI generation. Remember the people that really were kind of the primary functionaries in World War II. And my mom is one of the last of that generation. She's 96. I've spent the last month and a half, most of my time down in Memphis, helping care for her as she kind of is coming down to the end of her life. She'll be 97 in October. And I've just marveled at her life. And you think about how hard it is to understand generations. Think of my mom at age 4. Her dad is killed in a plane crash. He was executive at Boy Scouts of America in California. He, on the side, taught people how to fly double cockpit biplane airplanes, and had an accident, was killed. My mom was 4. She has shadow memories. She was raised by a single mom. So here my mom is coming to the end of her life. She's 96. She has 85 great-grandchildren. She has 5 great-great-grandchildren. She's been a missionary in Africa. She watched all of her male friends go off to World War II and then live the reality that many of them never came back, and that some of them did come back, were just deeply, deeply changed and affected by that experience. She lived coming out of the racism of the South and was trying to process that experience. I just look at her life and I think, what an incredible experience of being alive. But this is true for every generation. And so the greatest generation, 1901 to 1927. Does anybody even know the generation before that? You get a lollipop if anybody can answer this question. People born between 1883 and 1900. This was called the lost generation. This is all 4 of my grandparents. I knew hundreds of people. It's so weird to stand up here in 2022 and say, I knew tons of people born in the 1880s and the 1890s. We spent a lot of time with our grandparents and their friends and their events, and it's just so interesting. And those people, it sounds ancient, doesn't it? My grandmother, born in 1897, was deeply affected by the death of her mother from scarlet fever in 1908. She was 11 years old. And does anybody know how many percentage of people that died from scarlet fever when they got it 120 years ago? 15 to 20% of people died from scarlet fever. It's a little stronger version, but when you have strep throat, it's basically a form of scarlet fever. How many of you have had strep throat in this room? You look at that, probably all of us, and realize that 120 years ago, 15 to 20% of us would be dead. We'd be long gone. Her father became a despondent alcoholic who, when she was 11 years old, she'd go down to bars in Greenville, Mississippi, and walk him home stumbling drunk. And so all her life, you can imagine, she grew up with fear of insecurity, fear of having enough. She wanted stability. And she was a warrior woman. She developed a career as an estate appraiser. When when someone was selling their home or a parent would die, she would go in and put a price tag on everything in the house and became super well known in the Memphis and the surrounding area, very much in demand. She was an incredibly hard worker. I don't know if there's anybody in my life I ever respected more, and I haven't talked about her a lot, and I've missed her for 44 years. She died January 1st, 1978, my senior year in college. And this is amazing, guys. You talk about how different generations react differently. Are you ready for this? My mother and her two sisters-in-law were going through her desk in her office in their home, their little home that they were living in, and discovered a savings book from a local bank. And we're like, this is interesting. They open it up. It's $8,000. It's 1978. That's a lot of money. They're going through. They go through another drawer. They just find another savings book. This is $6,000. They go through. They find another savings book. They found over 10 savings books in her desk, amounting to $200,000 that no one knew about. Her husband had died 6 weeks before that. He was a cotton broker. He worked at the corner of Main and Beale in Memphis, bought and sold cotton his whole life. Went bankrupt twice on a handshake. You just see, so for me to say, how could I even begin to understand their generation? Oh, thank you. Here, hang on. I got it. Just toss it. Just flip it. Thank you, bro. We've been having a good time today. He's been giving me a lot of trash talk. But it's so fascinating. So as we begin this series today, I just want to say, if I could give one encouragement today as I talk about what the Bible says a little bit about generations, is be fascinated. Be fascinated. If you're looking at millennials, like Tyler in the interview was talking about millennials, how people look at millennials, like be fascinated by millennials. Be fascinated by boomers. Be fascinated by what, I've got a granddaughter that was born 2 weeks before the quarantine. And so she's like the original COVID baby. What is her generation gonna be like? I just would say, be fascinated with the world and with people. Be fascinated with my grandmother, who was so insecure and so worried about not having enough that in her desk was $200,000 in bank deposits in more than 10 different banks. And I think generations have always struggled to understand the generations before and after them. In fact, listen to this quote. We defy anyone who goes about with his eyes open to deny that there is, as never before, an attitude on the part of young people which is best described as grossly thoughtless, rude, and utterly selfish. Amen to that. That was an article in the Hull England Daily Mail, 1925, on the conduct of young people. That's a lot funnier than you're even giving it credit for. How about this one? Because I think this is so true about young people today. Young people are high-minded because they have not yet been humbled by life, nor have they experienced the force of circumstances. That's Aristotle, 4th century BC. Generations have, come on, give me a little credit, come on, man, give me some encouragement here. I just think that's fascinating. You could go on and on and on because you look at other generations and you're just like, they just drive me nuts. I like the greatest generation, my parents' generation, the GIs. I love the men in my life. But all the men that went and fought in World War II, they did an incredible disservice to my generation because they never talked about it. And literally, when you think back to Saving Private Ryan and some of the things, they literally went 40 or 50 years and didn't say a word. And so their kids grew up. We were an incredibly privileged generation. And we grew up frustrated with them, very little respect for them. And it wasn't until we were way older to realize what they had done. I remember sitting in my dad's back room off of their bedroom. My dad was a successful surgeon, really neat guy, and he had a gun room. We were duck hunters, and that was my favorite room in the house. It's where Dad and I had many great conversations. But I remember being 16 years old the first time I went through my dad's high school yearbook, and yeah, here's Ray Goff, captain of the Central High School football team. My dad's best friend, lifelong best friend. Larry McCormick was starting center, was All-State. First team All-State, starting center. My dad was the starting right guard. He was very average. And I'm like, Dad, you never talk about these guys. Who are they? Why have I never met them? They both died on D-Day. Gone. Wiped out. Those guys, gone, wiped out, and then my dad lives this unbelievably phenomenal life. You see, be fascinated by people and be fascinated by generations and realize that whatever generation that you're not a part of, you're never going to understand that fully. So how do we begin to step into, particularly in the church, for those of us that here who really love Jesus Christ, how do we build intergenerational contact and understanding? How can we adjust our attitude? I think that's what I've been really probably thinking about as much as anything over the last 20 years, because when you look at people that are not your generation, it's already happened today. You say things and you assume people are going to be thinking the same thing about that conversation that you are, and they're thinking something completely different. And so how do I raise my antennas to listen and to engage with people? Think about this. When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, I'm going to get to some scripture now, and he led them for 40 years in the desert. This is Jeff Mannion, who I just became good friends with recently. He's the pastor at Ada Bible Church over in Grand Rapids. Super neat guy. He wrote a book called The Land Between. He says between Egypt and the Promised Land, and you're living in this land between. I thought it's a perfect for where most of us feel like we're living right now. It feels like we've reached a moment in history where you feel like we're stuck in a wilderness kind of place. But it says, during this time, Moses passed away, and Joshua was one of his right-hand guys. He took over as the leader. And this is what it says about the people of Israel. It says, Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. They really got it together. They'd been slaves for hundreds of years. They were very unruly, but they finally got their act together, and they really started following God. But then it says, after that generation was gathered to their ancestors, after they all died, this is in Judges 2, the very next book in the Old Testament, it says another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. They didn't even know the stories. This is exactly what happened to my generation. We grew up and we did not know, we knew about World War II, but it felt like a long time ago. I mean, my generation, we grew up and we had nuclear bomb practices where we'd all get under our desk, because that's really going to help you when the nuclear bomb goes off. It's an incredible strategy. And it's so interesting that what happened to Israel and to the generation after him is exactly what happened to my generation. We were disrespected. I mean, we thought our parents, me less so, but it's like we didn't feel like our parents were in touch. In a lot of ways, they weren't. They weren't in touch with what was going on with us. But the point was, the whole generation died, and this next generation grew up. They didn't know the stories. It says, and then verse 11, for them, this is what's the result. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. And they forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt. And it's interesting, it was hardly even a conscious decision. They just, for some reason, it didn't get passed on to the next generation, or if it did, it fell on deaf ears. It's fun. As my kids are 36 to 28 now, it's fun to talk. Once in a while, a story will come up, and my kids all the time are like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah, and part of it was because maybe you told it to one, you didn't tell it to another, but part of it was they're finally reaching the age where they actually slightly care about the story, just a little bit. But for whatever reason, the result was they forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshiped various gods of the peoples around them. And they aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. Now, I don't want to get into it. I've talked about it. Some of you maybe have studied the Bible, but basically the Baal and the Ashtoreths were sinners. They were places of worship, usually in the higher places in Israel and that surrounding area, where they would worship the gods of the earth and the mountains and the trees, but and it was all built around sexual orgy and child sacrifice. It's really it was wild. And I'm not sure what they were doing this stuff to get the favor of the gods and God's attention. So here's the point. Every generation is always on the verge of forgetting everything that went before. Every generation is this way. My generation did it. Other generations are going to do it. And this is one of the things I want you to know. Even though followers of Jesus have been around for 2,000 years, is it Christianity, people following Jesus, is ever and only one generation long. I can only be responsible for my generation in the sense of my own life to follow Jesus Christ. I don't know if my kids are going to have to, my kids are in the process. I have 3 of my kids that are really seeking to follow Jesus Christ. I have one that has a great admiration for Jesus, but he's really in an interesting place where he feels like the story of Jesus in part is too small for all that he sees about the created universes. He thinks about the possibility of multiple universes and the studies they're doing in physics, and it's an incredible place that we are in this world. And I am learning to learn from them, but here's the thing. How do we build these bridges? How do we look back and look forward and appreciate it? Guys, one of the things that gives me perspective is there are some family members in my family that have been able to trace parts of my family heritage back 10 generations. Some of you can go longer than that. But I can go back 10 generations in multiple lines. And one of my ancestors about 10 generations ago was a guy named William Greenhill. Greenhill. Last name Hill, like middle name Green. He was a Methodist circuit rider. He moved from North Carolina to Tennessee. He was an early settler near Nashboro, near the Nashville, Tennessee area. And he hosted the first Methodist General Conference ever held in Tennessee in his home. And Francis Asbury, one of the great Methodist evangelists and leaders of the Methodist Church that exploded all across America, was in that meeting. But here's what's interesting. Over the generations that I can trace, I can show you all these men and women that love Jesus Christ and serve God and were unbelievable. And I can show you just as many that just did this to God. Just as many. I can tell you about my great-grandfather's brother that shot a man in the face in a bar fight in Paris, Tennessee, and was a fugitive from justice for the rest of his life. And in other words, because God's writing a story in every person's life. And I would say this, though. There's currently a generation alive today that I find incredibly unique. It reminds me a little bit of the 60s, but this generation is more and more than any generation I've seen, except maybe the one of the 60s, that doesn't believe that Jesus or his church has any importance for their lives or for their eternities. Recent studies from groups like Barna and other research groups show how church attendance with this group has been declining severely. It's the Gen Z. It's the group that we talked about. Can you remember what age group that was? Gen Z, those born from 1997 to 2012. And I would even move it to those born in the 90s and up. And it's a group that really, I think, is seeing the world very, very differently. And some of it is really interesting. More than any other generation in American history, this Gen Z does not uphold any religious identity. Most recent surveys show that 44% of Gen Z define themselves as nuns. And I want to be clear about this. Nuns could be atheist or agnostic, or a nun could be a person that really believes in God and could have even a strong connection to Jesus Christ. but they don't want any label, and they don't want to necessarily connect themselves to an organization. And now, in that generation, there are more nuns than people who identify as followers of Jesus Christ. That's never happened. At least people marginally identify as I'm a Christian, or I'm part of the Christian heritage. And so this entire generation is being fought over, and they are really interesting. And as Tyler talked about it, in my experience, if something happened, it was one of the things I knew it was time for me to step out of leading Kensington and turn it over to the next generation. Because as I was meeting with people of this generation, people that are in their 20s and 30s right now, and even early 40s, I would start to meet with staff people who are coming on our team. And I realized they didn't really care about the Kensington story at all, or my story. They were coming with dreams. And they were coming with things that they were hoping to accomplish. And all of a sudden I realized they didn't need my story unless it intersected with their story at some point. And maybe later my story would have interest. But they deeply longed for me to listen to their dreams and their visions and their hopes and to engage with them on that level. And so for the last 10 or 15 years with my kids and other people that generation, I have found myself, I got early spinal stenosis. I probably look older than I am. And it's like this generation really loves hanging out because they're longing for people in my generation to listen to their story and to connect and to be fascinated. And I thought today maybe some of you are parents right now, with younger kids, and you're freaked out because you want your kids to know Jesus. And you see and feel the pressure and the tension of the world in their daily life. And some of us, and I did this with my kids, I thought, I'm going to get my kids to follow Jesus even if it kills them. It's just another great strategy. Really works and really builds tremendous energy and responsiveness. But I thought, or maybe you're a millennial and you're right in this, or you're single, or you're a young married couple. You're wondering, what do I do with this this thing? Maybe you don't have kids and you think, do I even care? Do I even care about the generations? One of the things that I'm seeing in the boomer generation right now, and I'm seeing it all over the place, driving me nuts, is that my generation is going, man, listen, we did our time. We worked our butts off, and like, man, I don't want to be available to my grandkids all the time, I don't want to I just want to, give my whole energy. I want to I like to hand it off, and I want to sail off into the sunset. And I'm telling you, it's really tempting. Any of you younger people see your parents doing that? Some of you are nodding, like you're laughing. It's true. But listen, if Jesus Christ is alive, which I feel like he changed my life. Some of you thinking, well, you're an idiot. Yeah, well, you should have seen me before. It's like, because Jesus Christ brings life and energy to all these relationships. And so I think, wherever you are, how could you build bridges in a world that is more divided? Like the world that I'm living in right now is way more divided than the 60s and the 70s. Like it's gotten it's like, man, and with social, man, I have watched so many friends of mine like unfriend each other. And like, I don't even, you think that way? I don't even want to be in the same church as you. So when we started Kensington 30 years ago, we dreamed that we'd have people from all political perspectives and all walks of life and all levels of spiritual interest. And now it feels like in our culture, like, no, we just want to peel people off. Like, man, I'm going to get in my huddle and everybody's going to like what I think and I'm going to like what they think. That certainly wasn't Jesus' life or the people that he engaged with. In fact, when you look at his 12 apostles, if you really study into that, listen, it was a totally odd group and they were completely divergent. And it was almost like he was making a statement, is I want all people, right? And you come to John 3:16, God loved the world so that he gave his son, right? So that all would come. So the Bible talks about this generation. Let me just give you one generation, a picture from Paul, one of the apostles, writing to Titus, who was a church planter, just like I was. And he says to Titus, in Titus 2, you can follow along with me on the screen. It says, you, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. In other words, he's saying to Titus, man, I want you to tell people the truth about Jesus Christ. But here's the posture that I would love to see. It said, teach the older men to be temperate. You know, what does that mean? Not to be getting drunk all the time. I mean, alcohol and other forms of drunkenness have been prevalent from the very beginning of the dawn of time. It was a tremendous problem then. A lot of you don't even realize generationally. Do you know where the reason the temperance movement and the reason alcohol, there was a window in American history where it became illegal? Do you know why? Because men would work their job on the docks or wherever, and they would get their paycheck on Friday, and they'd go straight to the bar, and they would drink, literally, party all that money away on the weekend, and the women and the children were left without resources and food in their homes. And so the temperance movement was driven by who? By the women. They're like, stop it, so that the guy's not going to blow the paycheck. It's really fascinating, and obviously it you know, people have different perspectives on it, and we don't have that problem in the same way now, thank God. But it was like Paul saying, like, listen, very practically, the older generation struggling with being temperate, and also saying, teach the older men to be worthy of respect. I remember, you know, my dad and other men, like my grandfather, like, boy, you better respect me, or I'll whip your butt. You know, I remember that. But that's not what Paul's saying. He's like, listen, if you're an older guy here in this room, examine your life and go, is my life worthy of respect? Am I living that kind of way? Self-controlled. I think for the older generations, like, man, it's my time. I'm just going to do what I want. It's funny, self-control. I remember my mom, when she had just turned 80, she'd become very opinionated, was not unlike her. And she told me one day, she said, well, Steve, I'm 80 years old now, and I can say what I want. And I said, Mom, that is absolutely true. He said, you can do whatever you want, but other people also have complete freedom to not like you. And you know what's cool about my mom? She listened to that. That was a breakthrough for us, where she became much more careful over these last 17 years about her speech with people, especially with the younger generation. And it's funny, I don't know if she's going to live a week or a few months. She's really coming down the wire. But she's still living with incredible energy and passion for people. She's in a hospital, right in the hospital in Jackson, Tennessee. She's up staying with my older sister. And my sister texted me this week, and she said, Mom is unbelievable. Every worker that comes in, she wants to know their story. Every nurse, every doctor, she wants to know their story. She wants to know their children, what's happening in their life. Like, she's just maintained this love for people and for God her whole life. It's pretty neat. So, go on. Men, to be sound in faith, in love, and endurance. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers, be more like gossips, or addicted to much wine. Again, be temperate, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and their children, if they're married, to be self-controlled and to be pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, to be subject to their husbands. That's a whole other thing, but remember in Ephesians, the spirit, the vision of the early church was that everyone in the church would be in submission, subject to each other out of love for Christ. That's Ephesians 5:21. That was the umbrella of this. And do this so that no one will malign the word of God. So much, it's so nuanced in terms of Greek Roman culture. I don't have time to get into the layers, the different kinds of the culture of women in Greek and Rome, but it was a very difficult culture to navigate for women. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. I mean, isn't that interesting that the young men get one piece of advice? Like, okay, and now we get to the young men, and there's probably absolutely no hope, so let's give them one thought, because they're like ADHD, you know, okay, guys, just try to be self-controlled, okay? You know, when I was 16, 10 days after my 16th birthday, I had my mother's station wagon with 12 friends in it, and I was pulling a Cheetah tri-hull speedboat that had 160 horsepower on the back, and I was going down I-40 out of Memphis towards Little Rock to Horseshoe Lake, and I was going 130 miles an hour on I-40. Young men, teach the young men to be self-controlled. It's a miracle that I'm alive. We got off I-40 to the secondary highway to Horseshoe Lake. I was only going 100 miles an hour when I got stopped by the policeman. And he was so sweet, and it was a 60. He marked me down for 80 and a 60. He should have arrested me to save the lives of the kids in the car. But you see what Paul is saying? Paul's saying there's all these challenges, but in the generation, let's think about older and younger. Let's help each other. Let's encourage each other. And I think it's time that we say, hey, if we're older, I mean, we really got one purpose. Dave and Susie, we've talked about this a lot, but we feel like obviously our call is to serve the next generations, right? If you're not serving the next generation, why are you here? You're just taking up space. Wouldn't it be cool if we model putting our confidence and trust in God? So in light of this, I just want to say this. As I think about the next generation and what I've learned, and I want to talk about some practical things and then finish up. For the next generation, when I think about these generations, I'm always looking at the dates, but my kids are all kind of mid to late millennials. I don't really understand the Gen Z part of this, but as much. But I'm seeing this for the next generation of these younger generations. For them, I feel like I'm seeing, again, I'm going to talk in generalities. You feel free to disagree with me, but it's way less about who and way more about what. And I'm telling you, this is where my kids have kicked my butt. They have understood the holistic responsibility of life and the responsibility of influence way more than I ever did, and until recently didn't see it. You know, I've always seen little things, and they're like, man, they seem like they were, like my son will go, listen, we could solve the problems of the world if there was any will to do it, right? It just wasn't this, this fighting. And I think this generation connects all of life together better, certainly than my generation did, between faith, compassion, charity, church, family, friends, the compassion, the desire for authenticity, their desire to want to make a difference, but often they're frozen because when you're thinking holistically, a lot of times you don't know where to start. You see the climate problem, the political challenge, and you see the racial divides and the economic unfairness and all the things you see, and they're like, I don't know where to start. And so there's a struggle in this generation. I'm seeing that they think that the struggle is, well, I know I can post this article, I can write this opinion, I can chime in on a post, but in terms of what actually do I do, this is a challenge. They want to influence now. They care about the poor a lot more than my generation did. They lean into causes. They see the gospel, the social responsibility of the gospel to feed the poor, to care. It's the vision of the deacons of Acts, to care about the needs of people. They see that much more deeply than my generation did of Jesus' followers. Again, generalities. But I think they need us, and I think we need them. And we need to think about how we can do this. So I just want to give you 3 really simple things to think about. Number 1, listen. Here I'm blabbing for 30 minutes, but I just say, take the time to listen to others from different generations. And I'm going to press hard on this. We started this message by encouraging each other to listen and put aside our preferences. If you're going to change your attitude, it means you've got to be able to put aside your preferences and your assumptions, even about this series or about what other generations are like. But this also needs to be a practical part of our lives so that our preferences and assumptions are not used just to keep us feeling safe and secure. Because if that's the only reason we're keeping them, then we become rigid and stubborn and judgmental and we block people out. And it's interesting, the only people that Jesus blocked out were the really highly educated, religious, judgmental people. That's the only group that Jesus blocked out. So if you're really religious and you're really judgmental, it's not a real good spot to be in. And so it's interesting, a lot of you know this, who know the Bible. James says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And this is like a slap in the face for me, because I talk way too much and listen too little. But I think for generations, what if we really figured out how to listen and listen deeply? Stephen Covey was right in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. First, seek to understand, then to be understood. So this is the key to almost everything in life. Just to come into an encounter with another human being and say, man, I'm just going to try to understand. I think for 41 years of my marriage, Paula is talking to me about something, and I'm like, and the whole time I'm just formulating an answer. I'm just formulating an answer. I'm like, not like, lean in. It's really hard to do for a lot of us, especially me. But we often, by not listening, because we're too quick to speak and we're quick to become angry, we're slow to listen, we talk too much about what other generations might be doing wrong or how they missed it, and not learning from where they're not missing it. We end up communicating that our generation is more important. I think it's hilarious. Tom Brokaw calls, that 1900 to 1925 the greatest generation. Is like, yeah, okay, end of discussion. They were pretty cool in a lot of ways, but they had a lot of really broken stuff, man. When I think about issues of social justice and racism, that was not the greatest generation by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm talking about my mother and father, who I love and have great regard for, and all the men that invested in my life. But man, it was a incredibly unlevel playing field. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Horrifying in my lifetime. But research has shown, for example, Gen Z, they want someone that will listen without judgment. They desire to share their perspective confidently. And how can you share your thoughts confidently with an older person if that older person's like raising their eyebrows or already determined that their mind is not going to be shifted in any way? How can you be more curious? How can I be more curious and listen with humility? And I think this is a lot of what I do with my life now, is grabbing a coffee with someone of a different generation and just listening, asking questions, telling stories. And I do think that the older generation, the GI generation my dad and all his buddies, I love those guys because you know what? They were great storytellers about everything but World War II. They were great storytellers in my life, and I remember loving that and loving hearing that. The second one is even more important to me because it's a deeper expression of listening, and that is learn from each generation. Because I engaged my kids for about an 8 or 10 year window where I was listening, but I wasn't learning. Anybody with me still? Anybody stayed with me this far? I was listening, but I wasn't learning. My daughter Helen she's a lawyer in New York, but when in college she was a Bible major, and her college Bible professor said to her, he says, if you're going to learn, if you're going to be a student, if you're going to be a scholar, he said, you have to answer this question above all other questions first. Guess what it is? Are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to be wrong? Because if you're not going to be in communication with anybody, especially your children and your grandchildren and the younger generation that for many of you work for you or work with you. And so it's fascinating to me. This has become of primary importance to me. And I would say right now, with my adult children and my 2 sons-in-law, I just don't have many opinions anymore. But I feel like I'm learning from them. And some of them really would line up much more with the way I feel about Jesus and serving God. My son-in-law, Cam Underdown, some of you know him. During COVID, he started the website, mycovidresponse.org, where he wanted to connect people that were able to serve with people that had needs. And this website exploded. Tens of thousands of people connected to it. And they ended up making a couple of 100,000 food deliveries all over Oakland County. A couple of 100,000 food deliveries just from a stupid website. And I remember Janie had just been born. It was March 15th. The quarantine was announced. They were having dinner at our house, and they were going home. And I said, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to create a website. I'm like, that generation, whatever. Bunch of idiots, you know? He goes and creates this website. A week later, it's like it had 28,000 people visit the website. They ended up creating at Old Summit Place Mall, a huge food distribution thing. You drive up there. I bet people in this room did it. Anybody drive to Summit Place Mall, pick up food and deliver it? Okay, at least, yeah, I see a couple of hands. Well, you drive up, there'd be sometimes 5 or 20 cars in line. They'd have college students from OU and people, all kinds of people serving. It was amazing. But it was to learn from that generation. Anyway, he texted me that we were just together this week, all of my kids, and he said, my dream is that the church and people love Jesus, that one of the things we would do is what it says in Acts. It says they were all together and every need was met. Like, I never thought about that once in my whole ministry. I just wanted people to meet Jesus and whatever, but he's thinking about, I want people to see Jesus by us responding to their needs. And so now my 36-year-old son-in-law is the teacher and I'm the learner. I love that. One of my kids that don't see the world the way that I do in a lot of ways, they are my teachers still. I'm learning from them. And it's interesting. Ephesians 6:4 says this. I'm going to teach it in a way I've never taught it. It says, fathers, don't make your children angry, but raise them with the kind of teaching and training you learned from the Lord. I remember I learned this in the King James Version, which is, fathers, don't exasperate your children. That's one of those great words. Carl, I know you'd love that. You just love that. That's a great word. Whoever came up with that. Exasperate. It's like suffering succotash from Yosemite Sam. Okay, I'm totally lost it. But I always thought, don't make your children angry. Like, be a good father. Don't create impossible rules and whatever. And now I'm reading this as a 66-year-old man with children in their 30s. And it says, don't make them angry. When my children began to when some of my kids began to express strong disagreements with positions that I held deeply, on things that I hold very deeply, my first response as an adult man with my adult children, just as educated as I am, just as independent as I am, and I just got angry. And then they got angry. And I actually had like a 3 or 4 year window where we were family gatherings were angry. And one night, in the middle of the night, I felt like, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I felt like the Lord said, Steve, you need to shut up and listen. You need to stop talking. And not just listen to rebut, but listen just to listen and wait. Listen and think. Listen and respond. Quit exasperating your adult children. And then it says, but raise them with the kind of teaching and training you learn from the Lord. What is the assumption here? The assumption is that you're a learner, that you're learning. Because this is what I discovered. It's really incredible. I was not learning from them. I kept assuming they would see the world like I do, and they don't. And this is what I want to say to you today, and this has been life-transforming for me the last decade. Live as a learner and be changed by other people's stories. Even when you step into stories that make you extremely uncomfortable. To be alive and to keep learning. To stop learning is to stop being shaped. It's to be dead. To be willing to be wrong. And you know what I found out? And I'm just being really honest about my own family, my own life. I was listening to my children, but I wasn't learning from them. And you know what they felt? They felt completely insulted. They felt completely insulted. They said, you listen, but you're not learning, Dad. You're not listening to learn. And I remember, I got so many stories. I'm over time. Okay. What are you going to so sue me? Last one I want to say that is helpless sometimes as you might feel in engaging generations around you because it's almost impossible to keep up. I mean, my son and his buddies talk to each other all over the world. They're all in their late 20s, and they're addicted to racquetball. Anybody ever played racquetball? How square are we? I mean, it's, and he just loves it. You play a soccer game kind of like you're in the whole universe, and it's all centrifugal, applying centrifugal force and physics principles, like whatever. I want to play Madden football. Something simpler. But the one thing you can do is you can live out your faith. Joshua was speaking to the people of Israel in Joshua 24. This was the generation that did serve the Lord, and it didn't even work, right? Because the next generation forgot. But Joshua said to them, throw away the foreign gods that are among you. And I would say today, when you leave here in a few minutes, talk to each other about what are your gods. You don't think you have foreign gods? I guarantee you do. Tyler, the millennial, what did he say that his God is? Adventure. How many? That is one of my big deals in serving Christ, is to not give myself over to the indulgence of just being an adventurer. That's what I love the most. I don't care about things. The only reason I would like having some money is to be able to go somewhere and do something. But what is your foreign God? What is, maybe it's being right. Maybe it's holding to some kind of tradition. I don't know. But it says, throw them away and yield your hearts to the Lord. Thank you. Yield your hearts to the Lord. Again? He didn't. And the people said to Joshua, we'll serve the Lord our God and obey him. He was constantly reminding them to follow God. And I would just say, live it out. When I was a young man, I got really angry at my parents. When I was in college, I came home, I was really angry with my parents. Anybody ever come home from college and be angry with their parents? Show of hands. And realize how stupid your parents were? And it was so interesting. I was coming and I was so angry and thinking that they were just dumb. And I realized that it was so different than the posture of Jesus. And my last encouragement is this in Luke 4:11. I'm giving you this in the easy to read version, I think, or maybe it's NIV. I think maybe they put it in the NIV. Yeah, it says, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled. I want you to live in this as we come into our response time here at the end. Live into this with me. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. When you go into an argument to be right, how does it turn out for you? I don't think it's ever turned out well for me. But if I go into a conversation, a relationship to listen and be a learner, it's amazing how wonderful life becomes. And my kids, I think becoming a learner from them has totally revolutionized our relationship in a way that I just never expected. And they are living a life that I never imagined. I mean, it's such a strange world. And I want to read it again in the easy to. I love if you're on the U version ever, there's a new version called the easy to read version. I really love it. This is how it reads. Everyone who makes themselves important will be made humble, but everyone who makes themselves humble will be made important. There's nothing more important than being a humble listener and learner. And if Jesus Christ is living in your life, you can relax and do that without fear. He's not going to let you go. He's not going to leave you. He's not going to forsake you. He's going to hang on to you along the way. So pray with me. Father, thank you for this just wonderful principle that you invite us to posture ourselves like you did in a humble way, that we'd serve others. Lord, I want to pray for this beautiful team of people at the Birmingham campus and those that are watching on the stream, that we would be bridge builders between generations, that we'd be fascinated by people not like ourselves. That Jesus, would you make us not only bridge builders, but lovers of others more than lovers of ourselves? And would we be agents of humility with people that don't believe, and don't think you're important, to help us? Lord, would you use us to bridge the divides between people, to be a church where we would put aside differences long enough to listen and learn with humility, to be curious how we can all come together. And I want to say this to you, Jesus, in front of all of us and anybody that's going to listen to this message. I want to say, Jesus, I am doing this, and I want to invite everyone here to say, we are following you into the uncertain future, where the only thing we really know is that you'll be faithful to us, and your goodness and mercy will chase us all the way. In Jesus' name. And you know what? I forgot the offering, didn't I? Darn it. Okay. I was just going to move from this prayer into this really sweet time of worship. Your hearts were primed, but I want to just mention that we are going to receive the offering. And it's so amazing. After 32 years, I'm still terrible at this. But I just want to say God is moving and doing remarkable things. Your generosity and love for people and for serving the world. It's funny, I got a bunch of buddies and I we're starting 10 free days with our Daughters International on, I think it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow, August 1st. And where we just remember the daughters we're rescuing in Nepal. And some of you might want to look that up and join somebody that's doing 10 free days. But we learned something about all the incredible transformational changes that are happening in Nepal that are absolutely mind-blowing. But it's been such an incredible privilege to serve with you and with your faithfulness, and to see God move and work among us is really exciting. And I tell you, there's so many needs in this world, but we got to start somewhere. And I think we have some incredible opportunities to touch people with the love of Jesus. And I think the work in Nepal is unlike anything I've ever seen personally. It really is remarkable. So let's celebrate the goodness and faithfulness of God, okay? Would y'all stand and let's enjoy that together for a few minutes before we go? Would there be a mint in the bag somewhere? Would you want to grab me one?
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. In all my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire, in the darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. My life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running
Hello. There it is. Oh, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Okay, so go have an amazing week. Go be fascinated and listen and all of the things that Steve talked through today. Next week, we'll continue our conversations, but this week, just be so intentional about how you really learn from the different generations and how we can be part of this next generation leading well. Come visit us in the lobby if you're interested in going to the Tigers game, and if you're not sure today, you can still register online. So just a reminder, kensingtonchurch.org/Beham Tigers. It's Thursday night. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.